Demon Lord Ramirez is currently throwing a tantrum as she just really wants to move to Tempest. The voice of reason reminds her that Rimuru already said no, but Trainee on the other hand fully supports this idea. Rimuru is immediately informed of an issue and teleports to find Gobq arguing with a small intruder. Ramirez is grabbed. Trainee grows nervous, prompting Beretta to begin explaining the situation. Apparently Ramirez already sealed off her previous home and ordered them to build a dungeon entrance here. This fairy fails to come up with a decent excuse, but Rimuru no longer minds, as he likes the idea of Tempest having its very own dungeon. Now in the meeting hall, Rimuru asks if Gobq can add a large fancy door underneath the Colosseum. The craftsman is confused, all the while Ramirez grows exceedingly excited. Rimuru believes a proper dungeon would attract adventurers to Tempest, which in turn would mean an increase in sales. And Ramirez is giddy at the thought of having a job, and thus no longer being known as the deadbeat Demon Lord. Gobq points out that there's no room within the city due to all the beastmen, but Ramirez offers to just move the entire refugee camp into the bottom of her labyrinth. It's revealed that she can move inanimate objects inside without much effort, though sentient beings on the other hand have to voluntarily enter. Rimuru begins asking for details all about her mazecraft skill, which more or less makes her a god while inside the labyrinth. The dungeon can be extended 100 floors deep. It takes 1 hour to create each floor, and she can rearrange a floor once every 24 hours. Monsters do not spawn naturally, though Ramirez can actually resurrect people who die inside the dungeon, but if too many perish at the same time, it gets a little iffy. To counter this problem, Ramirez can create revival equipment, which automatically resurrects and ejects people who die. They've now picked out the location, but they're unsure if they have enough time. That is until the Beastmen volunteer to help with the construction. With this massive effort, it only took a single day to complete the basement of the Colosseum, and upon touching the door, they're teleported to the deepest part of the dungeon. They find the Beastmen's camp set up exactly as it was on the surface, and she's even installed a day and night cycle. Ramirez then begins working on the 100 floors, but she's curious as to how Rimuru is going to fill it with monsters, though her eyes light up at the answer. The sun has gone down just as Rimuru arrives to Kurobe's workshop. He's here to inspect the more unique pieces of equipment, such as an exploding sword and a power armor which drains the wearer's magic. Kurobe tells him to take anything he wants, so Rimuru picks out numerous items to put in the dungeon as rewards. Kurobe then hands him a brand new personalized jet black sword, which was crafted specifically to withstand Rimuru's full power. It's revealed, however, that the sword isn't quite complete, as its magic crystal is still being crafted. Back at his house, Rimuru exclaims that he's found a way for Veldora to release his aura. You see, every dungeon needs its final boss, and of course, it should be the strongest creature possible. The mighty dragon is all for this idea, and can't wait to unleash his full power on some daring adventurers. The real benefit to this, however, is that Veldora's magic will cause monsters to spawn inside the dungeon naturally. The very next day, Rimuru enters the dungeon to find that 15 total floors have been created. An exhausted Ramirez sits upon Veldora's shoulder, stating that the rest of the dungeon will create itself, so they turn their attention to customizing floor 100. The three of them then link their minds together, allowing Ramirez to instantly create the exact scenery Rimuru is picturing. It's a massive stone chamber, only befitting of a dragon, which also happens to have a human-sized bedroom filled with manga off to the side. It takes roughly a week for all 100 floors to be created, and they decide every 10th floor will contain a boss and act as a save point. Rimuru wants to know if they've tested the revival items, and Ramirez is glad to reveal they killed Beretta last night. Our slime can't help but to wonder if he could obtain a copy of this skill. Ramirez's mazecraft cannot be replicated. It's now come time for Veldora to finally release his aura. With an ear-splitting roar, a shockwave collides with Rimuru's absolute defense, as this dragon reverts to his original form. Ramirez admits that she couldn't have withstood that blast alone, and they look around to see the walls cracking and crumbling. This massive amount of magic, however, gave Rimuru yet another idea, so they build a storage room and fill it with iron, allowing Veldora's aura to transform it into Magisteel. The following day, Rimuru asks if Beretta wishes to serve Ramirez, and he states his desire to serve both Ramirez and Rimuru. Our slime, however, points out that serving her is basically like serving him, so he transfers Beretta's ownership to the fairy, who begins crying tears of joy upon gaining another family member. This means that while inside the dungeon, Ramirez has two powerful immortal servants, alongside an army of dangerous monsters. So Rimuru can't help but to debate whether or not the world is underestimating this tiny demon lord. With the 100 floors created, they begin to fill each of them with numerous different types of traps. These range from pitfalls to poison arrows, or this weird closed room trap Rimuru just asked for. He goes on to explain that depriving people of this invisible substance known as oxygen will actually cause people to die. Ramirez exclaims that Rimuru is kind of scary, causing him to ponder if he took this dungeon a little too far. Veldora, however, thinks it's fine, so they continue on without any change. Sometime later, they come up with the idea of adding natural disasters to a floor, but Ramirez declares it would take way too much mana to maintain. A friendly voice states that elemental dragons would cause a similar effect, and even offers to go capture them. He's shocked that Milam found her way here, as she pouts that they would dare try to hide this fun from her. Veldora and Ramirez proclaim this to be grown-up work, prompting Milam to easily restrain the fairy. Rimuru then explains that he's going to be hosting a festival, and that he's even planning to honor Milam's request. She's honestly just surprised he read the letter, followed by Ramirez complaining that she didn't receive an official invite. These girls then begin arguing, but Shuna breaks it up by threatening to withhold their snack. It's then revealed that Milam is here simply because it looks like fun, and definitely has nothing to do with her running away from Frey, who's trying to teach her how to properly govern a country. Though since it's not his problem, Rimuru accepts her offer, asking if these dragons will be something like Veldora. Milam and Veldora are immediately offended, as they explain that most dragons are nothing more than powerful beasts that spawned from the essence of the 4 true dragons. Now, she's unable to tame a dragon lord, but Milam agrees to grab 4 different elemental archdragons, which will each be placed between floors 96 through 99. A few days later, the dungeon is nearing completion, and it winds up like this. Floors 1 through 5 are easy, followed by simple traps beginning to appear on floor 6 through 9. The first boss awaits on floor 10, with the first mimic on floor 20. Though for some reason, monsters are yet to spawn. Veldora's presence is causing them to hide. Now Rimuru has carefully planned floors 1 through 50, but he allowed Ramirez to handle 51 through 60, and Veldora 61 through 70. Floors 71 through 94 are being left bare for now, and floor 95, which houses the Beastman camp, will be reserved as a resting area before entering Milam's dragon-filled floors 96 through 99. Honestly, Rimuru isn't expecting anyone to make it past floor 50, though he is creating safe areas throughout the dungeon where Tempest will sell supplies and food. Then upon looking over his beautiful creation, Rimuru can't help but to declare this dungeon to be vicious. You seem to be underestimating the difficulty. Not too long after this, Molly finally arrives to Tempest, where he formally meets Rigurd. Rimuru then says that he's thinking about instating Molly as the finance manager of Tempest, assuming the Colosseum does well. Rigurd has no complaints and even declares that he'll gladly cover up any mistakes that Molly makes. Though even without this underhanded help, Molly is very confident in his success. Later that same night, Molly is blown away by the fancy house Rimuru has prepared for him. It's really nothing much, as running water, baths, magic stoves, and toilets are all standard here in Tempest. Moving on, they discuss how adventurers may use this dungeon as their full-time job, and that the numerous monster drops may cause the guild to set up an official branch here in town. Then it's a short while later after dinner when Molly reveals that he noticed that the Gobblemon was protecting him from the shadows. This hobgoblin then enters the room with one of his arms half missing. Apparently, Gobblemon saved him numerous times, but on the road to Tempest, the Viscount made his move by having a basilisk overpower Molly's guards. Gobblemon came to their rescue, but was forced to amputate his own arm due to it getting petrified. Rimuru praises him for saving everyone, though Gobblemon exclaims that he failed since Molly noticed him. After attempting to give him a potion, Rimuru openly admits this to be why Gobta was promoted over him. This time, forcefully throwing a potion, Rimuru proclaims that Gobblemon's biggest flaw is trying to do everything by himself. He's then ordered to learn from Molly's group, and is given Rimuru's katana for a job well done. An unknown amount of time later, numerous different species from the forest have come to inspect the new Demon Lord. First is the rabbit folk, who are absolutely terrified and immediately swear fealty to our slime. Next is Abiel, chief of the lizardmen, who starts off very formal and nervous. Rimuru steers the conversation toward his banished son, as Rieger prods Gabiru to escort his father out of the room. The High Orcs then happily show off their children, which was only possible due to Rimuru helping them find a new home and abundant food source. Last group of the day is the Treants, who sent the Dryads Tria and Dorith to represent them. Apparently, the magic barriers over the roads have reduced the overall magicules within the forest, but at the moment, it's not causing any significant harm. No longer able to contain themselves, the Dryads ask to serve the Fairy Queen alongside their sister. The group goes to ask Ramirez, as the Dryads instantly begin praising her. Apparently, all the Treants wish to serve her as well, so Rimuru throws out the idea of just moving them all into the magicule-rich dungeon. Ramirez is all for this idea, stating it will be a piece of cake thanks to the power Veldora gave her. They're then placed on floor 95 alongside the Beastmen camp, and floors 91 through 94 are set aside for farming and ore production. Rimuru then debates building an inn and stores on floor 95, essentially turning it into a luxury resort. The following day, two new species arrive, the Bovoids and Equinoids. They've come to see this Demon Lord and are currently arguing over who gets to meet Rimuru first. After getting permission, Rieger prepares to use force, but a massive power just landed outside of Tempest. These two warmongering species are afraid of this new presence, as Rimuru's group rushes out to confront it. They find three young men surrounded by the town guards, some of which are already unconscious. Shion declares this to be Demon Lord Rimuru's territory, but they're fully aware of their actions. They were originally planning to defeat Clayman and steal his position, but Rimuru ruined that idea. Our slime slowly begins to step forward, just as Shion challenges them to a 3 versus 1. Knowing each of these three guys to be individually stronger than Shion, Rimuru looks to Benimaru, who says to just let her do as she pleases. Everyone moves into the Colosseum, as a swift kick launches one guy into his companion. Wasting no time, Shion sinks her fist into the third stomach, before turning and throwing another across the ring. The largest grabs hold of her and lifts, but Shion easily snaps both of his arms, before finishing him with a punch. She ducks under a flying kick, as an axe kick slams into her skull, though his leg is what shatters, as she breaks his other before mounting him and pummeling his face. Rimuru can't believe she just mopped the floor with those guys, but Benimaru states that she went easy on them. The eldest boy exclaims Shion to be stronger than he was told, and reveals they're all sons of Demon Lord Dagru. Apparently, they were kicked out of home for causing problems, and was ordered to go train under Demon Lord Rimuru. Very annoyed at this explanation, and secretly hoping they run away, Rimuru orders them to train under Shion. She is more than pleased to whip these guys into shape, and they are equally as excited to learn from their new master. Now back in his chamber, both races are kneeling, completely ready to serve Demon Lord Rimuru. And you know what? Every good dungeon needs a tough Minotaur boss. Some days go by before a male elf arrives, thanking Rimuru for calming the Bovoids and Equinoids. Apparently, their non-stop war had been ravaging the elf lands, which even resulted in some elves deciding to leave the forest. I mean, since they could use a peaceful place to live, Rimuru mentions the possibility of moving them into floor 95 of the dungeon. The elf elder immediately accepts, and Rimuru hopes they can eventually open up their very own elvish nightclub. Our slime then wonders if the Viscount's elf slave might have come from the forest, so he sends Soe to investigate. Around this time, Hakuro, Geld, and Diablo return to Tempest, just before Rimuru's final audience arrives. Benimaru escorts a party of armed Tengu into the room, who has a beautiful young woman as their leader. You see, this is the species Benimaru went to talk to about Tempest building a road to Thalion. His mission was successful, but for some reason, he and Alvis have been acting strange ever since they returned. Apparently, upon traveling to the Tengu's land, Benimaru and Alvis were greeted by the very powerful daughter of the Tengu Elder. Benimaru explains their plans to build a road, and Momiji's only issue is with them potentially drilling a tunnel through their mountain. Momiji then insults Alvis, leading to a confrontation and a 2-hit combo knocking Alvis away. She announces that someone is obviously inexperienced with battle, but Momiji thinks now is the perfect time to learn. With a flash of light, Momiji rockets forward, though Benimaru steps in apologizing and openly stating that his companion would have died. Alvis drops to her knees stunned that she would have lost, and Momiji drops to hers as well, as the Tengu elder enters the courtyard, scolding her foolish behavior. The group moves inside, where the Tengu elder, Kaide, points out that Benimaru uses the Hei's sword style. Momiji uses something similar, prompting the elder to reveal that she personally trained under Byakuya, alongside his grandson. Eventually, their master died, and as time went on, Kaide fell for, and spent a love-filled night with Byakuya's grandson. Finally piecing it together, Benimaru exclaims Byakuya's grandson must have been Hakuro. The elder is pleased to hear her love is still alive, and she's ecstatic that Hakuro raised Momiji's future husband. Kaide declares that she'd be more than happy to accept Rimuru as their lord, if Benimaru marries her daughter. An embarrassed Momiji doesn't want to force Benimaru into marriage, so Kaide politely orders him to think it over. Even through all this, Benimaru manages to get permission for the road, and you learn that Kaide has been gradually growing weaker ever since the day she named Momiji. Upon learning of his daughter, Hakuro got immediately offended that Benimaru didn't instantly accept the offer of marriage. Benimaru can't understand how Hakuro can be so defensive when he hasn't even met her. Back to the present, Rimuru and Momiji exchange polite greetings, where she declares they can live in peace, as long as Tempest doesn't meddle in their affairs. Rimuru says the Tengu can relax because he has no reason to bother them. However, Momiji brings up his association with Frey. Our group huddles together to discuss what this could mean, causing Momiji to grow angry at being ignored. She explains that Frey, at one point in time, was looking to conquer Thalion, and as such, tried to take control of the Tengu to bolster her army. Then because of this, she assumed Alvis, Frey's closest friend's strongest warrior, was sent with Benimaru as a threat. Now understanding, Rimuru prompts Geld to see what Frey has been up to. He states she's just been talking and working with Mildo to build the skyscrapers. Then outside of that, she spends the rest of her time teaching Milam how to properly govern her territory. Realizing that all of her assumptions were wrong, Momiji agrees to signing a pact with Demon Lord Rimuru. One of the Tengu officials then hands over a letter, which Shuna reads aloud. It's a message from Kaide to Hakuro talking about how Momiji is trying to win Benimaru's love and affection. Momiji jumps up, stealing away the letter, but Hakuro laughingly takes it back. He reads on to find that Kaide still loves him, and that she wishes for Momiji to train with him. This father then lovingly introduces himself, as his daughter cries tears of joy. Hakuro then proclaims himself to be a tough master, but he's hoping she wins over Benimaru's heart. An emotionless Shuna then relays a message from Alvis, who vows to prove her love by defeating Momiji. But even if she fails, Alvis would still like to be Benimaru's mistress. The guys then discuss how it's hard being too attractive. Gabiru and Geld discuss how difficult it is for them to just get a date, causing Soe to state it's not that difficult to attract women. For example, he recently caught the attention of Letus by using his sticky thread to wrap. Shuna ends this conversation. Benimaru openly states that he only wants a single wife, prompting Momiji to accept Alvis's challenge. Shuna then asks if Rimuru is okay with this battle of love, and he doesn't see a problem with it as long as nobody dies or gets too creepy. This then marks the beginning of Shuna and Shion's battle for Demon Lord Rimuru. With that chaotic situation settled, Rimuru holds a meeting as the festival is only 3 days away. He starts off by introducing Molly, who gives a rough schedule for how the first 3 days of the festival will proceed. Rimuru then asks if anyone had any issues, so Ramirez and Veldora step up, revealing that the forest on floor 95 has overgrown, reaching all the way up to floor 71. It's now consuming a massive amount of magicules, which is actually preventing the tougher monsters from spawning. On top of this, Ramirez demands materials so that she can build a golem, and Veldora demands for Rimuru to deal with the forest. Shuna suggests having Alderman become a floor boss, and Trainee offers up Zegion and Apito as well. Peeking out of the shadow, Ranga reveals that the fox wishes to handle the overgrown forest. With no reason to decline, Rimuru accepts and names the fox Kumara, almost passing out in the process. More magic was consumed than originally expected. Kumara then grows multiple tails, transforming into a 9-tailed fox, which Rimuru lets control floors 81 through 90. Lastly, Soe reports on his investigation of the elf slaves in Bluemund. Apparently the hero, Lightspeed Masayuki, already took down the entire slave trade and is even escorting the elves back to the forest. Soe then offers to kill the hero, but Rimuru thinks it's best to try talking to them first. Though honestly, he is a bit worried, because throughout history, heroes and demon lords always end up fighting. Be sure to subscribe for more slime, and a big shout out to all my lovely patrons.